Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are interested in finding out more about what we do, go to officehours.global. First hour is a general discussion about just anything you have, any questions you have around media and virtual production. Second hour is something we'd like to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about the Belfast method. This is a production process that we're experimenting with. We have been experimenting with it in Belfast. This weekend, we're going to be experimenting with it in North Adams, Massachusetts, with Todd Reynolds. So that's coming up, but we'll be talking about what we've learned so far, what's working, what's not working. Saturday is the long day. Of course, we have questions in the first hour, but then after that we have education at 8 o'clock, and that is not streamed to YouTube, so you want to get there and be here in Zoom. At 10 o'clock, we are going to do the Belfast method with Todd. So that'll be there. We'll be experimenting with it, and you get to watch us kind of figure our way out. That's in a separate meeting, which is also posted on in the email that everybody gets in the morning. And then at noon, we'll be cooking with Davinci Gajar, and it's an amazing experience. I would highly recommend checking out the link in office hours for the cooking, and then going to buy a bunch of things, and then cooking with us at noon tomorrow, Pacific Standard Time. And then at 2 o'clock, we're going to have the remotes in talking about how they built their last song, the song and the video. So we're going to be kind of going through that piece by piece at 2 o'clock on Saturday. So that's what's coming up this week. And let's go ahead and jump into the questions, Bill.
Good morning, one and all. We're going to start with a question from Adrian Allback in Brisbane, Australia. And the question is, what is the advantage of using a Blackmagic Design Pocket 6K over a 4K if it's only going into an ATEM Mini and Zoom at 1080?
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I think that part of it is the lenses. So the micro 4/3 lenses aren't as common for most people as the EF lenses that are on the 6K, which let in a lot more light and allow you to bring that background out of focus.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say for the start. That's the primary difference. There are some other things, it's a newer generation of design for them, so it could last a little bit longer. You're always chasing obsolescence with these tools because they come out so fast. So the 6K design was a year and a half or so after the 4K. So you've got a little more advance there.
Yeah, and as Mark had kind of alluded to, the 6K is better in low light. So it's going to handle low light better because it is with the larger chip, it actually does a better job there. Also, it is a shorter depth of field because it's a larger chip, Super 35 instead of micro 4/3, and it uses EF lenses, which are much more available. So definitely keep those into consideration. Next question. Can't hear you, Bill.
The best way to get started with Unity comms.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, so Unity Intercom has the ability to get a 14-day trial. The first 7 days will work just as normal, and after that you'll get some notifications on audio, little watermarks. And then also probably the really best way is to just engage with some of the after-hours activities. I've got a Unity Intercom system, and ping me and I'll get you signed into the system.
Yeah, I think that definitely participating in it is the first step, getting into events that already have it, so that you just get a sense of how it works, so you know what it should look like. And then, but the server has been relatively straightforward to set up, at least on our end. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago is up next, and Kyle says Vimeo and others were discussed previously on Office Hours as video-on-demand distribution platforms, but are there any new platforms out there that one should research?
I don't know if there's any specific ones that are kind of leading. You have basically the public ones that don't cost you anything, and Vimeo kind of fits into that in its base form at least, but YouTube and other ones there. I don't know of any other new ones that have become particularly good. Vimeo has really taken that kind of clear label, like I want to put something up on my page at high quality and run with that. So we haven't seen a lot of other ones. Of course, there's the high-end ones that you go into, the Kaltura and Akamai and AWS, and there's other things that you can do, but that takes a lot more lifting and coding to get those working. Next question.
Moving on to Simon Ray of Shrewsbury in the UK, and he says, can the panel recommend a tool or plugin for Final Cut Pro 10 to normalize the audio to say -24 LUFS? And what would do the same task in Davinci Resolve?
Go ahead, Bill.
Kleinfront, and I should post a link in there to it, has a LUFS meter system that is very useful for that. Normalization is a little bit weird. There are a bunch of tools, and I'm spacing on them right now as to what their names are, but there are some. But normalization should mean one thing. It's come to have a lot of plugins that do what they call normalization that I don't think is actually the real technical normalizing, which is a process of both squashing the dynamic range and moving the resulting file into a locked level, usually at the top.
I don't think normalization ever changes the dynamic range of the file, at least in its purest form. Normalization goes through the entire thing and tries to bring it all up to a certain level, to a certain set level. After that, we're talking about, compression. Next question.
Moving on to Hasmuk, our friend in Cape Town, South Africa, and here on the panel today. And Hasmuk asks, Cook-along show. How can we technically take the next steps in the evolution of the show? Is there any merit in taking it to the cloud similar to the TM Conversations show?
Tony Mobley show.
Okay. Or will, the Tony Mobley Conversation show, or will any of these devalue the merits of the Cook-along?
I think that probably the thing that'd be more interesting is to look at the Belfast method for it. So taking it where we start, because you already have all the hardware there. So you're already cutting between that hardware that's there. So I think that looking at how we log into your system and start taking over some of the bits and pieces would be really interesting. So I think that maybe after this, so I think that we should start brainstorming on that, and it'll be I think we'll have to have it. We have to figure out. It'll be the Hasmuk handling, or we'll have to think about what we call it. It's got to have a name. So we have to we'll have to think about that. So anyway, but I think that us taking over your space and cutting between the cameras and adding graphics and adding all the other bits and pieces, I think would be the next thing.
Cape Town method.
Cape Town method, yeah, exactly. But it has to be. See, we have different ones. You can only use method ones, though. We have to. It'll be the Cape Town. We'll have to think
Table Mountain.
Yeah. So we'll think of a name for how we're doing it. But yeah, I think that would be a really interesting way to take that whole process to the next level. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Another thing you could think about is, instead of changing the show that you're doing, is to add an add-on that will then add in all that extra stuff, answering questions and things like that. It could either be before you do the cooking or after the cooking, where people can ask questions like how much of this spice did you use, or why did you decide to mix these flavors and things like that.
You're gonna say, Hasmuk?
I almost feel that we could do with more than one or two additional cameras, really zooming into the pot when something happens. So I think that those are the kind of things that we could be doing.
Well, we didn't want to push it too far, but
graphics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that we didn't want to push you to go buy another 6K, but the more the merrier.
These will be iPhones.
Anyway, so I think definitely a couple more angles would be great. I do think we've told people to ask questions, but probably not often enough. So we'll kind of drum that up a little bit so that people feel like they can ask more questions because I think it also makes sense to do it while we're talking. So we'll work on that. We'll push the questions next time, and then let's look at how we start having people remotely take over maybe the following week and keep progressing forward. Next question.
Hasmuk is right back with his next highest rated question, which came in the list next. Cook-along schedule. The overlap between Belfast and Cape Town may somewhat create a hurdle for office hours folks to jump to the cooking show, or are we in Cape Town just being sensitive?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, Hasmuk, you just have to embrace the scheduling conflict and market it like that, and set your menu to Irish stew for one day and promote the fact that people can watch on another device the Belfast project and use it as background music as you prepare your Irish stew, and just publicize it and get a lot of cross-platform marketing out of it.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, and that's the challenge as a producer of what is your audience, where is your audience, and what do you want them to do? And as Courtney just suggested, I'm very familiar with the traditional broadcast wall of scheduling, and they would stack a show in front of another show so they could get a good introduction. Since the audience is already on that channel, then it would hand off to the next. I think Friends was like a behind something else at the time, or somebody else was behind Friends. So yeah, the whole scheduling of content, I'm very interested in that, because yes, I've got 2 shows that are in development now that I'm and now that we're on a global clock.
Yeah.
See, it used to be we just have to East Coast, West Coast, and Central, and now
I think
we're
that the challenge that we have is both
Yeah.
both the Belfast, in this case, not this weekend, but Belfast and Cape Town are both. It gets late for all of you because we would spread you out more, but one of you would have to go. Like if we moved, it's harder, I think, for Richard to have the bands come in later, than they already are, for that process. Or we don't want to push you later. I'd be happy to do. My sensitivity is mostly how late it's getting on your end, and so the reason that they're kind of, in that area on for both of them, and so we're kind of.
and Jonas's battery is going to wear out eventually. I mean that boy.
Yeah. Anyway, so
Don't
yeah,
get
so
much
the
sleep.
so we're trying to figure. It's the late. It's the fact that we have 2 that are late that is the problem. Is or the challenge. And so, and right now I still feel like we're. I guess I'm not. I'm more concerned about how many people show up to cook with us. So we can kind of figure that out. But I don't know if we're losing that many people that are, would do that instead of this thing. I think that the people who are really serious about it, that would be serious enough to go get the food, are probably watching anyway. And so I also think that we're still kind of getting our wits about us a little bit. I think it's turning into a great show. It's a great experience, but we're just starting to get figuring that out. And so I think that we can promote it wider. I think that there's enough people in the group. We just haven't pushed it harder yet because I feel like we're still figuring it out. So I haven't worried about it too much.
Those camera bulls are just waiting to be massaged.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae here in the panel from Dallas, Texas is up next with, can video routers be set up between profiles to easily switch between one configuration set and another?
Go ahead, John.
Speaking specifically about Blackmagic ones, there is a free way and a non-free way to do it. The freer way is with Companion. You could just set up and control your video router with that. And then the non-free way is the Video Hub Smart Control Pro. Has macros built in some way. I haven't used it myself, but I believe it's possible to set up macros in there, and you could just set up profiles like that.
Yeah, and then also I believe you can import I think it's a CVS file that is the entire router. So you can just say, you can save it all out as one thing and then just bring it in. And so it's not quite like I'm going to drop a new profile, but you can basically dump something else from it. Like literally we can go into numbers or Excel file or whatever and just build our router and then pull everything in and have it go. So that's another free way to do it. But yeah, the Smart Video Hub is amazing because you can build those in. We have a lot of those where we just hit the switch and everything changes to what we need to do. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says, the MacBreak weekly set has 3 monitors, 1 per guest, and a semicircle around Leo. How are they feeding audio to and from each guest and extracting each video feed for each monitor?
So each one of us, very much like what we do in our office, each one of us is connected individually to a different computer inside of Twit. And so Twit has, I think, I want to say up to 6, but definitely up to 4 that they have that are available there. And they're just a little PC that we call into. And then that is that's cut both in the mixer sets up a mix minus back to us. So we hear the show mix minus, and the video is they just send the program back to all of us for the video. And so it's an individual video feed, just like another camera to the switcher. Go ahead, Courtney.
Are they still using that Telos audio backend for everything to do the mix minuses?
Yep. Yeah, they have a Telos and a TriCaster that they're using for those. Next question.
Comes from Luca Pasquale Giannini in Montreal, Canada. And Luca asks, good morning. Nowadays, what's the use case for a Blackmagic web presenter 4K when ATEM Minis are very popular?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts to this. Number one is 4K being important, since you can't actually stream in 4K from the ATEM Minis. So that's sort of the first part. But the second part of it is there are older Blackmagic switchers and possibly newer Blackmagic switchers coming out with SDI. And there's plenty of devices that don't have streaming built in. So the web presenter, a dedicated box, being able to stream from that and have multiple of those beside each other, it's a much better workflow than going out of a switcher into an Atem Mini and then having to switch on the Atem Mini to send off. So I'd much rather have the web presenters in that case.
Go ahead, George.
So a little bit piggyback on John. So I have two of the old web presenters and the 4K. I'm always going to use an external video encoder. As we always mention in office hours here, it's just best to offload your encoding. The ATEM, the mini ISOs are capable, but you know, I'd rather just keep the switch into the ATEM Mini Extreme and just offload it to a web presenter.
Next question.
It comes from panelist Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas, and he wonders what are some of the idiosyncrasies of using Discord to access multiple Discord servers?
I assume that it's, I don't think there's any, I don't know of any. Rupert, what I mean, I have, like, I'm on lots of servers. They're all going down the side. The only thing I have to worry about is which one I'm in, while I'm talking. But
so a couple of things I see sometimes is, if people are in multiple servers, perhaps like maybe office hours was the first time they used Discord and now they're attached to other servers, and it's not always obvious that, like, direct messages, for example, are at the sort of Discord level rather than within the servers, or that their profile name sometimes may carry up to other servers or be inherited down, just things like that, where it's not always obvious to other people who may not be familiar with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a one thing that might be obviously, if you change your profile picture, it'll affect how you look in all the servers. Your profile name you can change per server, so you can actually have your profile, because we have a more stringent requirement than everybody else, because we know it makes it better. But if you change your profile now, what we did with PixelCore a lot of times is that, people had a very specific one, which was a black and white image with a white background, or actually a very specific gray background that matched the V bulletin, like it matched our thing. So you just look like your head was just floating on the thing as it went through, which was kind of cool looking. But what was interesting is a lot of people use those profiles in other places, and the reason they did that is it's kind of like a secret handshake. If you see that look in other Discord servers, you know that person is from our system. so you know who they are. And there's, like, literally people with, like, the same, they still use it for, like, their company profile picture as their PixelCore one, because when you see it in the company directory, you go, oh, I know that person used to be a PixelCore member. So anyway, it's kind of a cool secret handshake. Go ahead, Todd, and then John. Oh, can't hear you, Todd.
Sorry about that. One of the things that I've noticed that is a total idiosyncrasy is there's a left-hand search and a right-hand search. The left-hand search says start a conversation, and you expect, okay, I want to talk to John Barker. So I type in John Barker's name and it's nowhere to be found. Yeah. So the way that you have to then find those names is to go into the server, which you might share a position in with them. So if I go into here to record or office hours on the right-hand search column, search for John Barker, then I find John Barker, I have to jump to the post and then right click on his name to message him. So adding friendship is very different than sharing a position inside of a server with somebody. Yeah. So every time now that I message somebody, I quickly add them as a friend, immediately, so that then they do come up in my left-hand search bar whenever I want to talk to them.
That's great, John.
And as you add more and more servers, you can get very lost in what server you're in. And one time I was in the wrong server and correcting people's language and realized that I wasn't in my own server and it wasn't my place to be correcting them. So just be careful where you're at and who you're shouting at.
That's great. But we should correct it we just be the language police. We'll just go to Discord server. What? Clean show. All right. Next question.
Leo Mindell in Pinner in the UK is up next. And he says, I have an event in a temp marquee with a temporary floor, placing cameras on tripods or hanging from the roof. They shake with footsteps. What's the best way to resolve it? And I cannot disturb the floor of the roof.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I'm just trying to brainstorm this a little bit. I remember seeing some of the prosumer Sony cameras a little while back having gimbal stabilized lenses actually in the lens. Would that help in this situation?
There's lenses that are designed for this. The box lenses typically have that. Go ahead, Bill.
The other thing is the only thing that really stops vibration is mass. And so you could build a box or something like that, fill it with sand. That's a lot of work and a hassle, but the mass will keep temporary short vibrations from doing that. There are other rigs that I used to see, and I can't remember the name of them, but there was a backpack thing that had an arm over it that hung the camera on a cable. So if you took that as your idea and maybe found some way to put some more stable overhead thing and then rig it to a cable, but it's a hard question. Mass is the only thing that's going to stop vibration.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it kind of depends on whether the camera's going to be operated or if it's going to be static. You might try, just as just a brainstorm idea, getting a 4-inch, a 4x4 foot, 4-inch thick piece of foam rubber, and putting that under on the bottom on the floor, and then put a piece of plywood on top of that, and put your a tripod on top of that, and then throw a bunch of sandbags on top of the plywood that's on top, and that'll give it mass, and hopefully the foam will absorb any foot vibration that goes by. But optical image stabilization, OIS, which is available in a lot of still cameras, lenses, might be a way to go to take out that shake and leave it turned on.
Yeah, the box lenses will, the older box lenses tend to drift a little bit. You know, their stabilization, looking at a stage, tends to kind of drift around a little bit as it tries to fix something that doesn't need to fix. But the newer ones are actually pretty good. So if you, but those are like, you know, $80,000 lenses. When it comes to basic camera backends, the number one rule is the operator should not stand on the same platform as the camera. So you always, when you raise them up, when we build a riser for the cameras, we always have the, 1 inch. I always ask for 3 inches, so to make sure that there's no chance, but 1 to 3 inches between, and usually we're using 3 foot by 3 foot or 1 meter by 1 meter risers that go up, and that allows us to get the cameras over everybody's head, but also, gives us a place and keeps the operator separate. Now, the least expensive way to add mass is usually staging. So you can rent staging really cheaply, or a lot of times it's laying around at a venue, and you just stack it up. It's the stages that fold open. You just stack them up until you get to the right height. They add so much weight that they kill a lot, and that's usually something that's easily available. Tables will work the same way. For things that you're just trying to grab that's available. To Bill's point, we've worked on projects that we take a box. It's usually a little bit like a 4x4 box, and have a 3x3 block, concrete block. You lay a rail about 6 inches of sand. You drop the block in the center. You put the sand over it, put the top over that, and then add 2 inches of neoprene. And at that point, you could drive a tractor trailer through. You're not gonna see it. So and that it is a real pain to have that little vibration, in there. But really, it's all, as Bill said earlier, it's all about mass underneath the camera. Next question.
Moving on, Eddie Scott in Mission Viejo, California says, why does the daily email say that the Discord link only lasts for 10 minutes?
To keep people from waiting until 29 minutes and then complaining that it didn't work. So it lasts 30 minutes. So the Discord link lasts 30 minutes. But I say 10 to get everybody just to do it right then and not have it be there. So I'm lying. So there's the truth. I've come clean with all of you that I'm just trying to give you the information that you need so that you can get there.
You're not lying, Alex. You're strategically misdirecting.
No, it's a lie. It's a lie. I'll call it out. I'm just trying to push everybody. It lasts 10 minutes in my head. Like don't come and complain 12 minutes late. 32 minutes later, I'll say, well, I said it was 10 minutes and it didn't work. It doesn't work at 31 minutes. So, but technically it's 30. A lot of reasons we made it less than 30 was oftentimes we generated the link long before we posted it. So that's why there's some wow and flutter there. So if I told you 30 and we posted at 6:40, the problem is that we might have made it at 6:30. So you really only have 20 minutes. We don't, so by saying 10 minutes, I just am nice and safe. And I can just say, I know that you have 10 minutes to do it. I don't know anything after that. Next question.
Rick Timkovich in Wellington, Colorado is up next, and he says, I have a new Heil PR40 connected to my MacBook Pro through a Focusrite Scarlett Solo. Is there any app to see what my levels are locally?
I'm trying to think of what would be the best way to do that. There's lots of apps that will do it. I'm trying to figure out the least expensive ones. There's what you're looking for is some kind of audio meter. I'm just trying to think on the Mac. We use either Atomic Atom or Atomic Atom or Scopebox to see our levels. You can also jump into here. We always have meters open, so you can come take a look at them. But if you're looking for that, the other thing you can do, of course, is record it. It's using something like QuickTime, and then see what it looks like there. And I think in the VO, if you're on a Mac and you have Final Cut, you can use the VO there. Go ahead, Jonas.
You can use Yulene, which is a free VST plugin, and they also have an online loudness meter, so you can use your microphone, and it's on the website, so you can just open up the website, check your levels in there. It won't be accurate, but you can at least make it consistent, and then let someone else tell you where you should be hitting consistently.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So what you could also do is with OBS, you can set audio and video delays, and then set up with programs to so you could talk in, and then about 20 seconds later, it'll repeat what you just said, and then go into a leveler of some sort to give you meters, or you can do it by ear.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, have you ever had issues with brand stigma, for example, Blackmagic and Behringer, from clients that don't understand the capabilities of the actual products involved?
Eunice? Can't hear you, Eunice.
Sorry. I got totally
using one of those
lost in
cheap
my
mixers.
tabs.
You know.
Are you? Go ahead, Courtney.
I have run into it, and a lot of times it's more of a class of equipment snobbery. In other words, if you're using a prosumer device, but I find less and less of that. Since Red made some inroads into the professional world, and people had even started using Canon Mark IIIs in full-scale video production these days as C cameras and so on, kind of helped remove a lot of that stigma. But you still run into it, especially Blackmagic, because it's so there's such a disruptor price-wise in the industry. There is some resentment amongst the major manufacturers.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, yes, I saw brand stigma in the Avid and then the Apple, because Avid was entrenched because they were the pioneers, but they worked really hard in the New York and Los Angeles, and then they stepped down into the corporate world, and so there's brand stigma by the manufacturer on purpose, and they're going to find that audience, and so they're telling the producers, the directors, that is the only right tool, and then the PA is only supposed to go out and just do whatever the director and producer tell them to get. So.
Right. Yep, Bill.
And it's so fast that brands change their perception among the audience. I remember back in the early days when Marantz was one of the highest end audio brands, then it got sold off in a bundle to another company and it became a mid-level brand. And I've seen things go the opposite way. Alex talks a good little bit about how Behringer used to be considered a really bad brand, and then they got bought out and absorbed into a bigger thing.
I think they didn't bought out. I think they bought out.
They bought out. Yeah. Well, anyway, they changed their perception in the industry from a terrible player to a quite good player through acquisition and marketing, and actually just doing good work. So I think brands are always doing that. So it's really hard, and you just have to be tough. If you want to use this tool and you're the creator, use the tool. Don't listen to everybody else.
Right, Jonas.
I found there are different types of clients. There's, of course, the client that has a lot of technical understanding. If you get hired as a freelancer for like the producing firm, then it's totally their right to tell you, hey, we want to use this because we have experience with that. That's an existing workflow. I found that a lot, that they're like, oh yeah, you could use that you brought, but we really would like you to use this because that's what the other engineers also know. What I also found, if an end client that comes to you like, hey, can you please produce my event? If they suddenly start to think about the tech and like, hey, are you sure you can do it with that? Then they don't feel safe with you. Then you have to talk to them. They have concerns about something else and ask about the tech because of that. But it's mostly not about the tech.
Or they're talking to somebody who says, oh, that hardware doesn't work, or this software doesn't work, or whatever. There's a couple things that I mean, I've grown up using products that people thought shouldn't work to do that thing. One of the things we point out generally is that integrators, the people who are building their studios, make more money when they buy more expensive gear, and rental companies make more money when you rent more expensive gear. And so the least expensive gear is always going to be talked down around it because people are making less money using it. Now there has been issues, and you have to also know what the issues are related to your hardware. Like for instance, for a long time, Blackmagic's interfaces, they're not the interfaces, but like the SDI components, were really weak. And so if you didn't know how to use them well, you couldn't put them into a rental system because they would just get destroyed almost immediately. You had to give them confidence, and you had to have your own crew, and these pieces of hardware oftentimes are ownership models as opposed to rental models. And when you want to own it and you can take care of it, it works great. If you rent it, it doesn't. And so it's two different models there. One thing to be careful of is not to oversell your hardware or software that you're using. If you're outside of the norm for where you are, there are some limitations to what your products can do if you bought them for less. And don't try to say that they're just as good or they're better or whatever. They just do the thing that they need to do, in the budget that they need to do them in. And you want to not try to overstate it. I remember telling someone that my EX1 was, it's a 1080, just like the Grass Valley, camera. It's not the same. But back then I thought, well, they're all the same resolution. And I still feel foolish about that comment. Anyway, so you just don't it undermines your credibility with all your partners and everything else. So just be careful of that as well. Next question.
Our friend 1F Jeff Keithley in Texas comes up with the next question, and actually it's kind of a job offer. Is anyone working consistently at the moment? Is everyone? I'm struggling finding freelancers to crew last-minute on-site events in late September. Yes, I have posted in Discord under open positions.
Go ahead, George.
So, believe it or not, I've been forced to not accept gigs lately. What's happening, and talking to labor coordinators or labor companies in the DC area, is that a lot of folks during COVID have turned to other industries and positions. So the pool is really slim right now as for workers. So that's one of the major problems right now that companies are finding. It's hard to find, and a lot of it's specific right now. Like I'm getting calls for Zoom operator, RoboCam operator. So it's very specific positions now are being filled, and there's not a lot of folks to fill those positions.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I'm willing to do stuff, but a lot of stuff that I do is remote, and it's not probably as high production as you might be looking for. So that might have been one of the reasons why I decided not to go and fill out the form just now. But we can definitely talk and see what I can do to help you out in this time of need.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Unrelated necessarily to Jeff's needs, perhaps, because I don't know if he's looking for remote people to come in just remotely to operate, but I'm finding in Hollywood a lot of productions are starting back up again, and the reticence of people to go back to work because of the draconian COVID measures that have to be in place to show up on the set. You have to be tested before, and now almost all the since the FDA approved Pfizer, almost all the production companies are requiring proof of vaccination, or you can't even show up even with a test. So that's leaving a lot of people out, and that's thinning the market, and a lot of people are just using their unemployment to live off of, and that seems to be fairly lucrative.
Jonas?
I found that in Germany we have a similar issue right now. A lot of time you're trying to search around for people, and what I found is that sometimes if you ask for something specific, people get scared so easily and fast. Like, we needed a clear comm operator, and it was like, yeah, I never worked with that, but I know a lot of people that I worked before that are like, yeah, I never worked with that. Give me like a handbook and I'll figure it out for you, which is an interesting thing. But also I'm working with lots of volunteers in my church now to get some people to do some jobs, because it's hard to find anyone right now.
And one thing that we might want to think about with Jeff is also ways that we can do test events that use Jeff's infrastructure in ways that, we might be able to do something, because that allows us to train people and find people. And it's hard for people to say, oh, I can do that for pay, because I don't know if I can do it or not. But, that's, a lot of this is me constantly looking out and this is what saved me when we had a heavy push with Google 10 years ago was PixScore. I had people suddenly just showing up all over the world that we had spent years working together on projects that didn't pay anything, test projects and all kinds of other things. And we were able to very quickly ramp up and and handle demand. And so I think that's it. I will say that we're having the same problem that Jeff is. We have it sorted, but it was a huge lift. We have an event at the end of September, and it was a huge lift for us to find everybody. So it's a thing. Next question.
Everybody, Tim Holm is up next from San Lorenzo. He says, Vimeo just released an option for a sub 10-second delay for their live stream platform. Used it last weekend, but many people experience buffering delays. Is this normal when latency is reduced?
Go ahead, Jonas.
So all the internet connections are like not solid all the time. They have like 2 seconds of where they have lower bandwidth and 2 seconds where the bandwidth is higher. What most of these video delivery services do is they put a buffer at the end. So the video doesn't have to come there in real time. If you have like a quick downtime, since that video snippet is only needed 10 seconds later, it has 10 seconds time to recover from that downtime with like a little bit higher uptake. As soon as you make that buffer smaller, suddenly it hasn't as much time anymore to get that video. And what buffering means is there was a downtime and it was not able to recover from that degradation of bandwidth. So if you make only the buffer smaller and don't work on your transmission technology, you will always get buffering with poor connections.
Unless you're doing something that really requires low latency, and there's very few reasons to do that. You know, like sports require low latency because people are betting on it. And there's a handful of other things. Usually people go to low latency because their comment system is broken. You know, like that's why. I mean, they have to try to respond in real time, and when they don't have that problem, you know, like the latency between the time this question was asked and what we're answering now is 45 minutes. So anything less than 45 minutes would have been fine. So and it turns out that 20 seconds works really well. You know, and so I think that when you get a proper way to manage the interaction with the audience, you don't really need the low latency. I don't think it buys you anything other than trouble. Next question.
George E. Kennedy Jr. in Washington, D.C. With MixEffects Pro, do we continue to build ATEM macros or stack button commands with Companion and the Stream Deck?
Go ahead, John.
My advice has always been and will continue to be avoid the macros in the ATEM as much as you can, because while it's great to build them, as soon as you want to make a change, it's not so fun. And if you want to build something fast, like the other day I was on a show and I built a Companion trigger DSKs, run a thing on the hyperdeck. I did it all sort of blind without knowing if it would work, and it actually worked. I couldn't have done that if I built that in a macro in the ATEM.
Yeah, George.
So totally agree. Obviously the fear is, you know, with a Companion and the Stream Deck go down, but I'm finding just working with MixEffects, being able to stack, like I know we're limited right now to the ATMs with only for us one super source, but trying to maximize it, I'm looking at ways. For instance, I always know Alex is going to be the host, but we have 20 more people on this panel. How can we build shots for all of this? So it's possible, and I'm doing it just right now. And I know Atem is working on a Companion module. So just trying to see what everyone is going to be doing and going. Like John said, the macros are a little bit harder. It's definitely easy to stack the buttons. So I'm just trying to get an idea of what everyone is doing as we move forward with these processes.
Jonas?
When I build macros for the ATEM, I try to do only one action. Chaining of actions is really, then you get confused and you really have to test your macros. But especially for longer running shows, I like to put stuff on the ATEM macros, especially if it's like time intensive, because it needs, like, we wait 3 seconds, 3 frames, and then we trigger something else. I'm a bit scared using that over the network just because the network isn't always the same. But I think also recovery time. So if Companion or a MixEffects crashes, you should always have a way in your head how you can run a minimal version of your show without those attached control devices. So that's where I use macros for my use.
Hosman?
I covered all my bases with the medical event. So created the super sources on MixEffects, then created a macro within MixEffects, and then mapped them to the buttons on the Discord. So I had all the options. Obviously, I was totally dependent on the macros in ATEM, but there I chose the higher numbered macro buttons in the ATEM, so I could use the 1 to 6, I think, or 1 to 4 for quick switching from the ATEM itself.
Yeah, what we'll see, and we'll break it out a little bit as we get into Office Hours 2.0. But basically, we're abstracting all of that away from the person operating it. Now that might be dangerous. We'll find out. You might want to let us do it for a little while before you try to do it the same way. But basically, it's a mixture of ZoomISO and Zoom OSC and Isadora and MixEffects Pro and some, I think, Here to Record, and there's a whole bunch of pieces that are all getting tied together to make all of that work, and they're all talking to each other. And what's amazing is we have most of the developers all talking to each other about, like, oh, I need this hook here and I need this hook over here, and they're all kind of pulling it all together. But I think that to get to that point of, like, okay, and especially in a Zoom thing with what we're doing here, you don't want to try to have to rebuild like who's in what window. You want to know who's in what window and put them in where they need to go as they need to be there. And so it's going to be kind of a brave new world in a lot of ways as we get on that path. But I think that it's not AI. It's kind of low level decisions being made, and then of course the interface for what we're doing is all web based. Like, it's just not, there's no companion or anything else. It's just a window and you just tap on the things that you need. Now maybe we'll move it to companion at some point, but it's not. So anyway, so that's what's kind of coming. Next question.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California is up next, and he says, what type of hardware would work for setting up a 4-camera system that would be totally remote controlled, including camera, lights, and sound? No budget given.
We've been doing this for years, and so the big thing, the light is the one thing that we haven't done as much of, but DMX over Streamweaver, is something that is totally a doable thing. So Liminal's Streamweaver passing the data back and forth to handle the lights. From there, cameras, you have to decide whether you want PTZ cameras, but those are all, they just have to be able to be driven from an IP connection. So everything you're looking for is something that has some kind of remote IP. So all the ATEMs do. So that's your switcher. The cameras can be shaded through the switcher. So that's your cameras. We use telemetrics heads, which we could do through over IP, but there's a lot of other stuff that you can do that with as well. Sound, most of the software, whether it's Yamaha, we've seen some of that Yamaha or Behringer, all have ways to manage that over a WAN connection. So, and a lot of this, what you're seeing us experiment with in the Belfast method is this process. So my biggest thing is I would definitely come by at 10 o'clock tomorrow. Oh, in the second hour here, but 10 o'clock tomorrow and talk about that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, despite NDI in 2110 being part of the landscape, SDI still rules the large-scale broadcast roost. Wouldn't it be harder to troubleshoot a forest of SDI cabling to and from each source versus 1 or 2 Ethernet cables?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I think even with the networking, we're still going to see large amounts of cabling. That's just kind of how that goes. It's always going to be, in broadcast environments, you're going to have more than a couple to worry about. But really, how hard or easy working with those technologies is, that's a side effect of what level of expertise you have available. That's really what's going to make the difference here. SDI is obviously pretty ubiquitous still, but you have to remember with technologies, it's really a point in time. There's a future coming too, and the forward-thinking broadcasters are looking at other options and investing heavily in 2110 and the expertise.
Right. And we're going to have to move really fast now because we're running out of time. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and in all professional broadcast situations, they have a giant routing switcher that everything is permanently wired into. So the cables don't really have to be touched once the installation and initial checkout is done. Then they have breakout boxes that are on the outputs of that routing switcher, so that usually the only thing you have to troubleshoot is that cable between the breakout box and your camera, and everything else is software controlled. So very little do you have to dive into that mass of SDI cables.
Go ahead, Jonas.
Also, most SDI cables are labeled, so you know what cable goes where, and it's not like suddenly five streams of the SDI doesn't work anymore. And I actually still prefer the SDI method for anything local. I'm a bit scared about all the signals running over 2 cables at the moment.
Yeah. Next question.
John Merrill in Phoenix, Arizona says, I have a 7-month-old MacBook Pro M1. Battery maximum capacity is now at 92%. Does that seem about normal, or is my battery dying too fast? Just curious.
I go ahead, Jeffrey.
It depends on what you have loaded on your computer and, of course, what you're running on your computer. If you're saying this while you're doing a live stream, for example, yeah, you might be able to only get up to 92% because that's as fast as the power plug can get the power into the computer as opposed to draining from there. There is a key combination, and I can't remember it right now, that does check on the cycles on the battery, and you can definitely do, I think it's like option and you hit the Apple key and then go to system preferences or something like that, and then that'll tell you if your battery is doing good. But then you can also take it to a Genius Bar and they can check for you as well.
Yeah, it leaving it in plugged in all the time reduces it. So they say it doesn't, but it does. So leaving your computer plugged in, a laptop plugged in all the time, it's creating lots of microcycles. Next question.
George E. Kennedy Jr. in Washington, D.C. here on the panel. Is audio hijack and loopback a possible solution for audio out of ZoomISO?
Go ahead, George.
So the answer is yes. You want to go ahead and build a routing in loopback first, name it ISO 1, and then go into the to hijack, select the application block, assign it to ZoomISO, and you want to assign a delay block also, and then an output block. And you could tie those together, and it's working pretty well for me. It's a little setting the delay for meetings and webinars a little bit different, so you might want to take a look at that.
So are you having each person do that, or are you doing that for each?
I'm doing it for one right now because obviously ZoomISO is not giving you all 4 outputs individually, but I'm just doing for one, just assign it to Decklink 1 as audio output. Obviously, it looks fine, and the sync looks in order on meetings. Webinars is a little bit different, but it's working so far in my testing for the Decklink side. I'm sure Loopback can expose it to NDI also for vMix, so I haven't tried it yet, but it's definitely that solution is actually working for the Decklink side.
Next question.
Tony Mobley, our panelist, often in Noonan, Georgia. Has anyone had any issues with the M1 iPad connecting to the Atem Mini, and particularly using the Apple adapter?
I know I haven't. I've definitely done that. So, but I'm not connecting. Well, I don't connect it directly. So if you're looking at, I connect it through a network. So if you're trying to connect the iPad directly to the ATEM, I don't think that's going to work. You have to connect it to a switch with the ATEM to a switch. I don't think that they connect directly as a software. So next question.
Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. Zoom Events has the option to require attendees to be logged into Zoom with the same account they use to register for an event. Would this be a welcome feature for Zoom webinars and even meetings?
Jonas?
I don't think so. It's I see that there will be a lot of people that have issues with that because they're either logged in with some work account or are not logged in with an account, or then they have to find which email did I use to log on to the Zoom web client, and the Zoom web client doesn't tell the Zoom.
I think you can do that right now with webinar.
So what you can do is you can require authentication. So you have to be logged into a Zoom account, but not the specific Zoom account that you use to register, which is the difference. But I think that's totally fine because then you have a traceability, can ban people, and also the link is still pretty secure.
Next question.
Jonas Dattel in Stuttgart. On Tony Mobley's show, the calling wasn't happening with inputs or number, but with the name of the person. How do you think this changes the production of a show?
That's actually not an uncommon thing to do with cameras. So sometimes some technical directors will go, ready camera 1, ready camera, but some of them will go, ready Andy, go Andy, get ready to go. And that's kind of a different way. It just depends on what the director is capable of. In some ways, it's easier for the operators because they know that they're being talked to, and they don't, especially when you have a lot of cameras. So that it's not uncommon for that to happen. I've definitely heard it in shows. Next question.
Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. Up next, NAB Show updated its health and safety policies yesterday, including that we'll be hosting the Clear Health Pass Validation app. Is anyone familiar with the Clear ID app, and might more in-person events implement an external app like this?
Yeah, I think it'll definitely become more popular. So that it's getting those in. I think that they're trying to figure out a way to get people to come back to them. The problem is that by creating those, they also create a drag. So they're basically, there's 30% of the population just won't show up anymore. And so that that won't try, and it's probably more like 50. so any of those things that require them to kind of fiddle with it, it's probably like half the population. So that's the drag on the show to do that, but they have to, because they have to make sure everyone's healthy. So that's going to be a challenge, across those systems. Next question.
Mark Giuliandri in Alexandria, Virginia. When using different kinds of cameras, such as the Blackmagic Design Pocket Cinema 6K, along with a PTZ and an iPhone, what is the procedure for calibrating the image to have the same characteristics?
You have to go to the lowest common denominator. So that's the challenge, is whatever camera you have the least amount of control over is the one that runs how you do it. So you get that camera to where the closest it can be to what you want, and then the other ones that have more control have to be matched to that camera. And then what we use is what we have. The problem is that you have to use a chart and do it, and tweak the camera settings to get them all to where they need to be. In the past, we used the ATEM to do that, to tie those in. But what we're going towards, or what we're experimenting with when we have all Blackmagic cameras, is actually doing the color correction in the LUT. So literally putting all the cameras with all the lenses up, pointing them at a chart, a known chart, and then calibrating against that in Resolve, and then loading LUTs back into the cameras. And what that means is that they're all hardened and they all match, and you only have to make very, very minor changes, and exposure obviously during the show. But when you're mixing and matching the cameras, that's the thing in live we avoid almost all the time. So we try to have the same cameras all the time, because it's just really hard, because their color science is completely different. And so getting them to match 100% is extremely difficult to do, but you'll always have to start with the dumbest camera and match to that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, Rolling Stones organization quickly found a substitute drummer, Steve Jordan, after Charlie Watts' death, and are continuing to tour. Where would major bands find musicians on short notice? Would they use a union or a placement service?
Go ahead, Todd.
Neither. You won't, although a musician of that caliber might be in a union, they probably aren't working inside of a placement service. So all of these things at that high level are all word of mouth. So it's going to be somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, or somebody who's already played with the band, which I think it is the case in this particular thing. I'm not sure. So it's like probably not those two options. It'll be all word of mouth. It's an entirely risky position to take the place of Charlie Watts in that band. It demands somebody of not only high skill, but high reliability, and somebody who knows the band.
Bill, and then Jeffrey real quick.
Yeah, when you think about it, these are as much business organizations as they are bands at that level. They're going to have key man plans for everybody, because the amount of money you would lose if you had to refund a stadium full of tickets is unacceptable as just a risk profile. So they'll have people, they'll have an understudy for everybody.
I go, Jeffrey.
Maybe not Mick, but
I was in Vegas at Roger Waters' show for an enterprise thing, and I got to drink with the band, and the drummer from Cheap Trick, not Bunny Carlos, but the substitute drummer, was drinking with us, and that's when I found out that he does have a lot of contacts. It's all about the production crew and who they've worked with in the past and who they can bring in. Just like in the movie, That Thing You Do, when they brought that bassist in, they said, "Can you play our stuff?" And he just went on to town. There's people like that can do that. They've been working on those songs for years.
When you work with session artists, you get that there's people out there that can listen to the song like a couple times and just do the thing. They're able to process the structure very, very quickly. Next question.
Moving on, Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Any recommendations for a wireless PC keyboard with a similar level of build and key action as the Apple wired ones?
Rupert?
I would just say stay away from the cheap ones. And really one thing you want to look out for is actually the security on some of these ones these days, the wireless ones. Check out some of the Logitech Bolt documentation about the security standards, and that will lead you to ones that are good quality and provide a similar level of encryption that the Apple one does.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I was going to say Logitech, stay away from the cheap knockoffs. They just did an article on a lightning cable from a cheap knockoff that could steal your data. So you might want to worry about that.
Go ahead. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, what device do you recommend for labeling cables? I've heard of the Brother P Touch before.
Courtney. I can't hear you, Courtney. Is he here? Courtney? Oh, he's frozen. This is what I use. So this is the P Touch Cube Plus, and it's Bluetooth to my computer, or to my iPhone, and it also plugs in USB-C to my computer, and the software is amazing. And I would never use anything else at this point. It also takes lots and lots of different tapes, so that's what we got there. So next question.
Douglas Carmichael again. Let's say Disney wants to remaster Phantom Menace in 8K. Could they easily rebuild the original VFX shots, even though the hardware and software used is now ancient? Would Electric Image, for example, run on modern OS versions?
There's still Electric Image out there, so you could still load I don't know if you could open the files in something from that 20-year-old files in Electric Image, but in the current Electric Image. But it'd be really interesting to try. Anyway, trying to put back the pipeline is so complex for Phantom Menace. It's something that I know a little bit about. Is that the pipeline? It's not so much the software; it's that there was custom pipelines. When let's just say Jar Jar. I know this is a little touchy subject. We don't talk about religion or politics, but just say Jar Jar. You have someone working on Jar Jar's envelopes. How his skin works and everything else. You have someone working on the model. You have someone working on the textures. You have maybe a couple people working on the textures. You have someone animating him. You have simulations running on his ears. You have the lighting being set up for it. You have the compositing being set up for it. All of these are different people in the pipeline. When someone hit render, the system would go, give me the latest model with the latest envelopes, with the latest animation, with the latest textures, it would just grab all of whatever they were working on at that moment and start shoving it through the pipeline and all the way to the end. And so it's not any one piece, and a lot of that was custom software, but it would grab onto whatever's there. What's funny is that it made for really funny dailies, because sometimes it would grab onto something that someone wasn't done with, and Jar Jar's ears would be standing straight up or flipping around, like spinning around, because the simulation was off, because it wasn't a finished animation. It was just grabbing everything and just pushing it out the pipeline. It was an incredible pipeline. It's much more, I'm sure it's much better now than it was 20 years ago, but anyway, so it grabbed all of those things and pushed them all out through the system. That is gone. So you could never, I know it breaks your heart, but you could never re-render Jar Jar the way we did in the past. We'd have to do it all over again, and we'd probably just, maybe on second hand. No, not really. All right, next question.
Ted Claudio in Quezon City in the Philippines says, using a Zoom H5 as a mixer, how do you connect the H5 to the ATEM Extreme Pro ISO?
I think that you would have to connect its 1/8 inch out. I mean, it's got a headphone out. I think that you'd have to go out of. I don't think that there'd be, or I actually don't know enough about the H5. Does anyone have an H5? I don't know if anybody uses that. Yeah, so yeah, go ahead, Tony.
I have the H6, and it I'm just using it's connecting to the Mac Mini through the USB.
To the Mac Mini, but was that I thought it was to the
the question went away. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can't move it's really blinding to move the question. Whoever's moving the questions, it's really blinding for us.
That was me. I'm sorry. I thought at 8 o'clock it was.
You can't touch the questions until we're done with them. Yeah, because the problem is it doesn't sort them correctly in.
Yeah, the question was, using Zoom H5 as a mixer, how do you connect the H5 to the ATEM Extreme Pro ISO?
It's not the Mac Mini, it's the ATEM Mini that we're trying to connect to, and that I think you have to do through the headphone jack. I think is the easiest way to do it, but I don't know for sure. All right, now we're gonna change subjects, and we're gonna go into the Belfast method. So the Belfast method, for those of you well, actually, I'll let Richard tell us a little bit about how this all happened.
Yeah, sure thing. So to give a bit of context, well, why not? Why not add some slides to this thing? As much as Alex hates them. So this is our building in the 1960s, and this is the building now. So we are a small, what's called a non-traditional arts venue in the city centre, which converted an old bank. It was a bank for about 100 years, and then it's been empty for about 13. And then we converted it about 3 years ago into a theatre. It has a theatre on the ground floor and then other facilities above it. So whenever COVID hit in March last year, so we've been closed and we still are closed since March last year, we kind of upped the streaming game a bit. We were already doing kind of streaming. So this is my colleague Niall. In March 2020, this is how we used to do streaming, where we had a iMac Pro and some Wirecasts and a couple of NDI cameras. And then in December, I decided to move it down into the basement underneath the theatre and start to kind of build a whole little control room. So then we moved into kind of different iterations of that. We have here kind of the build of it as we kind of slowly kind of move forward through it. Added different pieces of kit, an ATEM 2ME, then we added a Clearcaster, then we added hypertext, then we added computers and more screens. And then this is kind of us running a show in the background now with different screens for different playout and scopes. Then we've got our cameras in the actual theatre itself. And we have around about 6 kind of cameras, and I'll go through kind of what we've been playing with in a wee second. So because the lift has been quite quick for us as a building, it means there are lots of areas we haven't yet got time to touch on. Those are things like LUTs and proper lighting, extra kind of skills in lots of different areas. And I thought, okay, well, we're going to be learning this stuff. We are still learning it from office hours. Office hours has helped a huge amount with where we came from to where we are now. But so how can I kind of give that back to the rest of the office hours community? How can we learn together to do it? So I kind of approached Alex and said, well, we've got this facility. How about we do a cooperative project where we can utilize this facility with all these cameras and things and learn and practice different skills all together. So that's essentially where the project kind of came from. We have a lot of things and we want to learn them. Our team wants to learn more about them, but why don't we learn everything at the same time? When I used to work for Apple, they always said that if a person comes in with a question in Apple retail, you don't say you don't know, you say, let's find out together. And that's kind of stuck as an ethos in my head for a very long time. So it's then Alex kind of put a call out on one Friday a couple of weeks back and said, who would like to volunteer to be involved in that? And we very kindly had a whole load of people kind of say, I want to get involved, and we're here for some of them today. And we had Jim and Jonas and Todd and Marcus and Talok, kind of all volunteer at the beginning. And then we added other people to it as we came through. We haven't yet got to Ash and Manolo to again get them involved in the same way that the others have. And I kind of said, okay, well, we've got this. What would people like to control? And we kind of put it out to, I think it was Friday, we got people set up on VPNs, and then the Saturday we troubleshooted and connected those mostly with Jim's absolutely excellent help and Jonas to kind of connect us all up together, work through different kind of problems. So whilst the education hour was going on in the morning, we kind of worked through all the different connections issues. And that first Saturday, a couple of weeks ago, we focused mostly on camera control and mostly on switching. And then we had an extra Zoom session where people from the office hours could sit in and then call the show along with us. So these are the kind of toys that we've been playing with. So this is what we've got in the theatre. There's a big long list of actually what we have in the theatre in the Belfast Method Discord channel. It gives a full kind of breakdown of all the different things we have. But this is the kind of things that we mostly started focusing on. And starting with mainly the 3 Panasonic UEs and the 3 Ursas is the kind of main camera kind of bank that we've got. This is our theatre. As it was pre-COVID with seating and everything like that. So as I said, it's an old banking hall converted over, so it has certain limitations in its size and its and in its columns and little things in the way in certain places. But it's worked really nicely. We decided deliberately didn't put things like seating banks and stuff into it, so it could be really open and really more useful. And this is kind of what it looks like at the moment. With the stage area, and then these are kind of the standard kind of camera positions that we've got for most of the default kind of tests where we've started with. But we have given everyone the option to change those, to come in and play around with whatever they want and mess around with things. So first of all, we got Jonas and Jim and Todd and Marcus and Aaron and then Douglas all connected into the 2ME. And then we also had Jim and Todd and Craig connected to the X32 console. This is over the 2 weekends. And we had Talok connected into QLab and Nomad, which unfortunately has never worked. But we'll come back to that. And hopefully Talok will be able to come in and talk through some of the things that we've troubleshooted to try and get that. So then we connected everything into office hours, and then we connected all of us together via Unity, and then we streamed it all out through the Clearcaster to YouTube. So that's just a really brief kind of who's doing what, who's connected to what. And as I said, QLab did not work. So really brief, just kind of connection in to what we've been doing and who's doing what.
That was a great use of that transition. Does anyone want to, before we jump into the questions, does any of the folks participating want to add anything to it? Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
Sure, happy to. So first of all, you know, we all are fond, we're all here on office hours for a reason. And a lot of it is educational. A lot of it is learning. And, you know, I am a classical solo violinist gone horribly wrong. I live in a technological space. That's where I'm happiest. Till the beginning of COVID, I had done nothing photographically except shoot with a Nikon D700. And I was very proud of my photographs that I made there, but I'd never looked into a camera like this. And so that's my start. So when I think of that and a year and however much forward, the idea that this has gotten created to where I got to take 5 minutes and actually call a bit of a show, number one, in the first week, switch for other directors who kind of showed me how calling's actually done. And then the next week, and even that week and the next week, do some super source stuff. The idea that I've kind of waded into these waters as much as I have has been amazing. And then of course on Saturday, we'll start at 10 o'clock Pacific time, but then at 11 o'clock, I'll actually stream a YouTube stream where all these folks will now take over my studio, which kind of, you know, which looks like this, but I mean, forgive the mess. I hope to have it cleaned up a little bit by tomorrow. But the idea that I'm going to be able to do that and collaborate in a way that I think is artistic, because I'm going to ask for visuals and you know, it's really a collaboration between crew and artists. That's how I've always believed things are. It's like one doesn't exist without the other. That's just kind of how I live. So the idea that I can participate with my friends and colleagues who I've met here and use this Belfast method of like wiring in, thanks to Jim Hankins, is kind of extraordinary for me, and makes me leave me a little giddy with excitement and apprehension and overwhelm and all the things that I have to do before tomorrow to make this work on my end.
You know, it's very rare to have the opportunities that we've had with the Belfast method to do that, because you usually don't have a band available or an artist that's available that's willing to let you just kind of fiddle around with their gear. And, you know, it's taken us a lot, and then being able to kind of so what it's allowing us to do is figure stuff out that would normally take huge amounts of money. You know, you hire all these teams and you try to figure it all out, and you're paying them all a day rate and you're doing all this other stuff. And we're able to get out ahead of that and figure that out before somebody else would, because someone's got to figure out how to come up with that kind of budget to figure those things out. But we're able to do that. And I think that as a group is allowing us to set ourselves up for success. It also, because we're able to start thinking about new things long before we're going to see them in the rest of the world. Like, we're going to be the ones bringing this into the rest of the world. All of you, doing that is because we're experimenting with it. And we've been very fortunate with everything from what Victor's doing to Mad in the Kitchen to the Belfast method to what Hosmuk's working on with Damianti to Conversation with Tony Mobley. And what you're starting to see is all these shows where we're experimenting with new formats and new production processes. And some of them are in the cloud, and some of them are in hardware, and some of them are a mix, and some of them are all, but we're starting to, figure it out. And I just want to say that was my dream of when I started this, is like to collect all these people together, get them all working together, and then have us figure out what the next generation of media is, rather than just continuing to use the old version over and over and over again on some new platform, and I think what we're finding is a way to do production that's global. Like it's because there's one thing of being able to have, you know, I look at what we're doing with the Belfast method is you can have lots of venues that can't put those kind of people on the ground all the time, but we could have production people that just link into it, you know, and we could get, eventually I see a venue getting to a point where it's almost all, there's almost nobody, there's like one or two technical people there and the venue runs on its, you know, with a virtual crew, you know, and it runs really well. I see also the ability with what Todd's going to do on Saturday as what happens when we send a kit to an artist that we want to bring them in from their home. We just want to send a kit out and take over, you know, and we're going to figure that out because I think that's exciting. I mean, I think that, you know, when you think about going out, the other thing is that eventually there could be receiving venues, you know, so you could have theaters or cafes that are going to see that concert coming in, and that could be in really good, you know, immersive audio and all kinds of other things coming into that space. So they're receiving it, but figuring that whole connection out. What would be really cool is with those little ones, when you figure out that broadcast, what if we were going to Todd was able to play to, you know, 100 receiving venues, you know, whether they're theaters or other things all at one time, or something coming out of accidental theater out to a bunch of other theaters, not just streaming to people's homes, but streaming to other venues, you know. And I think that this is going to be the big game for entertainment or for music is, you know, the people are going to get past the whole, like, we're going to pick up a bunch of gear and move it from one arena to another. When what we're doing, what we're experimenting with right now flips and starts to really work, it makes that all obsolete. You know, like it's not that it won't happen. It's just that it'll be the old fashioned way of doing things, you know, and eventually it won't financially pencil out, you know, like that's the fundamental thing is that the weight of those kinds of shows, when we start building something that's, you know, light and fast, you know, and so, and we have to note that while we're doing this and when we're talking about it, there's a lot of people watching what we're doing, you know, like, you know, and so there's a lot of people learning from what we're doing. And so it's a pretty exciting place to be. Anyone else before we jump into the questions? Anyone else want to say a couple opening words? Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, first I just want to say this is such a different environment from what I came from. You know, I was doing emergency communications, and it's a little bit, you know, smaller groups, you know, focused, you know, energies, but this is so much more, for me anyways, helpful for the soul to collaborate, you know, in a creative fashion. And so, you know, it hasn't been said enough. You know, Richard, thanks so much for the opportunity to work together and to learn, to develop muscle memory and all the buttons. And I mean, I've got this crazy, you know, setup here that I was working with, learning how to use, and people are asking me to do things. I'm like, I'm not really sure I know how to do that yet. I'm going to find out, right? And this is how you do it. So thank you very much for letting us do it.
Go ahead, Jonas.
That's one of the things that I really like about the Belfast method, that we are empowering people that would not be able to work on production events yet. And Richard really gave us this empowerment of like having a venue, having a head end where we can connect to, which is really amazing, because otherwise we probably would have played around with a lot of Pis and Atem Minis for a long time till we get to a 2ME and a real console and a band and everything.
Yeah, it's exciting. Tony?
Yeah, I'm just as an outsider looking at the Belfast process, I'm wondering, how far are we actually how far along are we away from actually being able to reach out to artists and say, hey, this is what we're doing? I'm just curious because it looks pretty good to me right now. I was just wondering.
Well, it's the venue has to be set up. The hardware that Richard has invested in, the venues have to set that up to make that work. For artists to mail stuff out, probably 6 weeks. I mean, I'm working on building the kit right now. So, and part of what we're going to do is use Todd and Victor and other folks, probably Todd because Victor's on the road, and other people that want to, of like, let's figure it out with the kit that they have, but then let's figure out how to send a kit, you know, out to make that work. Go ahead, Sky.
The three keywords for me are that critical this is understood. It's an attitude of experiment, because once it becomes a product or a service and money becomes involved, as you say, it just gets different. And again, I did the spreadsheet on Matt in the Kitchen. There's no way that could be afforded. There's no practical way. But what we did, the second word is community. And I adopted that word from Alex you early on. And what we're doing outside a commercial economics, but inside of a gifting economy, there's something to that. So those are keywords. And that's the attitude of experimenting. Allows us to do things live that an edited thing, the audience is going, well, boy, that was bad. They should have fixed that. And that's just the world we live in.
And our willingness to do stuff, to put time into something without pay, makes us very dangerous as a group. like we can do a lot, because we can sit there and experiment with stuff that no one else is going to experiment with anytime soon.
Well,
and get way out of front. Like now what we're starting to see is all of this work that we've done over the last 18 months start to, we're not hunting and gathering, we're farming, and we want to keep thinking about that. We're farming, we're building up this slow thing that takes a long time and it takes a lot of building and everything else, but then there's a lot of it. Hunting and gathering, it's like, oh, I found something today, but I can't find something tomorrow. And so what we're doing here is really building up an infrastructure that allows us to keep on doing this and growing. Go ahead, Jeffrey. And we're going to go move pretty quickly so we can get into the questions.
So I was doing some switching last week, and it's something that I don't know where I would actually go to actually do this. So this was brand new to me, and it really got my wheels going. This could be something you could offer to even something like an NAB or things like that. So there could be a virtual aspect to it. But the other thing that I was thinking of, and I was talking with Todd about it right before the show, was I have this machine dedicated to sending graphics on my shows. And I'd love to try and attach it to your system, and then bring in lower thirds, bring in and title overlays, so that could be done as remotely as everything else. So would it be Talalik or Richard that I would be talking to on this?
Probably Richard. Yeah. Jonas.
A real quick answer on Tony's question. One of the things that we have right now is we have a lot of people working on ideal conditions. Richard's theater is amazing with connectivity and what they have done for the last half year. What we don't have to get loose of sight of, we're working on the good days right now, get them stable. And then one of the next big challenges is to make a framework that works on the bad days. So that's also something to keep in mind.
And design a rack. I mean, we want to get to a point at someday where we design a rack that has all the cameras and everything else, comes in a couple cases to a venue, and you just roll it out and it all works, and so Richard's is giving us the opportunity to figure out how to do that in a venue, or we just send out a spec of like, if you want to be one of our vendors inside of our club, then this is what you need to get for your, this is the cost, like literally it could be, and it's $120,000. You just write a check, we'll send it to you, it'll get installed, it'll do its thing. Go ahead, Talalik.
So as one of the people who participated in this and failed, I think there's a lot of, it's really important to talk about that too. And that that's super important. And to have the room to do that and have it not be expensive is really, really cool. And it's not just about making the thing you're making. It's also about making all of the things that I'm trying to make in the next year. Like this is super, super valuable to me for work that I'm doing right now. So thank you so much.
I mean, having a place that you can fail, so important. Like to be able to fail, you want to fail often and fail small, and as soon as people start paying for it, it immediately becomes a thing that you can't fail, or you can't really fail very often. And so you really have to tighten everything up, and then you can't experiment anymore. And so I think that there's a real opportunity for us to kind of go all over the place and figure that out. Go ahead, Richard.
I completely agree, Alex, but I will also say, I don't think Talalik, you failed at all. So I don't think about that. I don't think it like that at all.
So far, we've just found a bunch of ways it doesn't work. so that's all we found so far. We're just on the path of making it work. We found a bunch of dead ends. Go ahead, Hasmukh.
Yeah, I think just coming back to without pay, it gives us the freedom to experiment and freedom to, express ourselves. Comes with a lot of pain, but the joy is the anesthetic to all of this.
And the thing is that the other benefits that we get is we get to know what everybody else is like to work with. We get to know everybody else that's working on the project. We get to know what they're good at and what they're getting good at and what they're passionate about and all those other things. And that's going to lead to us hiring each other. Like that's going to, like when somebody has a job or something else, and the thing is we're also building an industry that we can go into. Like we're literally building the thing as we go. As people get excited about it, we end up with a lot of it, and then there's suddenly a large demand, and we're kind of at the beginning of it. So it's cool. All right, let's jump into the questions.
Robert McRae starts us off this morning from Dallas, Texas, with could the Belfast method be boxed up and drop shipped on to any location?
Go ahead, Jonas.
Yes, and that's what Jim already started with some of his equipment here. Put it all in a box and send it to Todd. We're working out the wrinkles of that, like how do you work with a professional venue internet versus a home internet, and what box do you need? Right now, we're just sending connectivity equipment, but there could also be a small mixer, a mixing engine, or something else. And that's really the thing of the Belfast method, putting the equipment on the edge so you can do stuff that would otherwise, either with connectivity or just a raw upload bandwidth, wouldn't be possible in the cloud or on your head end.
Jim?
Yeah, I think as I reflect back from what I shipped, should have shipped a bigger box, but we will make it happen. But yeah, so I've shipped like VPN routers and a streaming bridge, a dual link video out, but I probably in hindsight would have shipped a couple encoders so that we have a reliable way to ship more back on the return video for multi-views and program supersource, because it's really hard to make out how that supersource is looking from a Zoom feed. So we're working through it and learning as we go.
Yeah, Todd?
Just going to add to that, Jonas mentioned ideal conditions. I think I said this to Jim this morning. I spent all day working with Jim yesterday on learning network things that I don't know and asking him questions and him answering every single question that I asked. So I know so much more than I did before. And I said to him this morning, man, if this is my day gig right now to figure this out, and this whole Saturday, this whole week is gauged towards Saturday, so I can do something special that I really am invested in. If this is my day gig, I'm doing all right.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a lot of us build these. I mean, that's what we want to do is figure out what's needed, what works, what hardware, what software, and then you figure out how to put it into a rack, or a series of racks that just say, plug this into here and plug this into here. And we do this all the time, for this. So it's definitely doable to either provide venues with a spec of this is, if you want to do this all the time, this is how you do it. If we want to send it to you, this is how we send it to you. And I think that those things are, and the more efficient we get at those, there's ones like single person like Todd, there's venues. We want to think about different ways of activating that. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Jeffrey Powers in the panel. And Jeffrey says, switching an unknown session is a lot harder, especially music. Would adding a video audio delay for the switcher with a real-time look for the director help in making concise switches?
Go ahead, Richard.
I think in answer to the question, that would confuse the heck out of me if I was switching. It'd be very hard to do the double brain. But a lot of the work that we've done is done without rehearsal. In the last kind of 6 months, so we don't pre-see the show. We have to react, and we're quite in all modesty, I think we're quite good at it because we've practiced at it and we know how to react and we can anticipate. Anticipation is probably the biggest thing, but rehearsal is probably the answer to your question. Getting rehearsal time, getting planning time, getting time with the band to using things like QPilot systems like that where you can actually plan each shot. Getting video footage of what the band or what the act will do beforehand in rehearsal is really helpful to understand movements and where people will go and things like that. I don't necessarily think a delay video would work as well.
Go ahead, Tolak.
Yeah, so there's a continuum between rehearsal and preparation. So if you're not going to have any rehearsal, you need to be prepared with all the tools that you can so that you can react to the music and do the right thing at the right moment. The simplest example of that is whether you're doing a cut or a dissolve. And so if you have the way to make that change between a cut or a dissolve, that means you've prepared enough to make that choice about that music at that time.
Yeah, I know I've said this a bunch of times, but I just always want to repeat it. Is the quote from General Omar Bradley. It said, "Amateurs talk about strategy, and professionals talk about logistics." And live is all about logistics. Of just figuring out what it's going to look like and how it's going to go, and what are you going to put in there to react to it. I will say that for most TDs that do this all the time, music all the time, and I think you'll find this when we bring in a couple other people, when this starts to iron itself out, and we start bringing in a couple TDs that have done literally thousands of shows, I think you're going to find that they don't need any rehearsal. They kind of know where they want to go, and they're thinking by the bar, or they're thinking by the beat, and they know where you're going to come up. If you're going to do something, you're going to do it right now. So we're going to cut to you to do it. Always rehearsal will make it better. Like we see it tighten up. Like when we see on the concerts that I've been working on recently, we might get to see it 5, 6, 7 times. Like exactly the way it's going to go. And so you'll see the TD get better and better and better about calling it and figuring out where they want the cameras for that moment and figure out what they're doing. So you're right, Jeffrey, that the rehearsal is a huge thing. It will always make it better, but you can make a reasonably good show without too much lift. Just that it'll keep getting better if you have more time. Todd.
Just a quick add-on to Tlaloc's statement about tools. And when we first did this first day of the Belfast method, I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I did have my iPad here, and I have been using MixEffects Pro by Atem Tao. And oh my goodness, I was able to do the whole calling thing, the whole switching thing so easily and quickly because it was up in front of me. So that's an example of having a perfect tool to do that job. It was not even something I had to think about.
Yeah. The next question.
JHB in New York City comes up with, what was or is the audio setup for the artist on the Belfast project? Thanks.
Richard.
Yep. The two bands mostly set up in the same way into an X32. So it's X32 console. The second band, Rob Murphy's band, he normally prefers to go into his own console that doubles into our console for the shows we've done with him in the past. But we convinced him to go into our X32 this time. So Craig, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, to give us his thoughts on audio mixing remotely, so that Craig could get access to every single channel. So that's the main system.
And I think that one of the things that we've never done successfully, but one of the things we're really interested in is the idea of remotely connecting an X-Touch. So just a control panel to the X32. And we've been close. And I think Streamweaver might help with that. But we've been close, but we haven't been successful at that in the past. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. Up next, should the Belfast method use the AWS region closest to the location or closest to the operators?
Jim.
Yeah, so in this particular case, we weren't really using AWS. We were all either using site-to-site VPN, or we were using remote access VPN to directly connect to Belfast. But I am working on an infrastructure script for Todd's show this weekend that uses CloudFormation to essentially build an infrastructure in AWS. That one of the components that it uses is a feature called Global Accelerator. So essentially, Todd's VPN connection is terminated via AWS Global Accelerator, which essentially allows you to shortcut the number of hops between where you are and where a piece of infrastructure is that you want to connect to in AWS, in this case, a site-to-site VPN connection. So it's just some trickery that AWS does with Anycast to advertise these IP addresses that are associated with your account to connect in. So we're going to try that and see how it works. We're getting about a 33 millisecond ping time between Todd's location and AWS right now across the VPN, which isn't too shabby.
That's amazing. Jonas?
Exactly what Jim said. You don't want to bring your data center nearer because we're working on deploying it all over the world, but stuff like the global accelerator or building that yourself, having outposts close to people.
And I think that's the exciting thing that we're figuring out, not just how to run the cameras, but how to tighten this entire back end to make it more and more effective. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. After Jeff's comment about it being hard to find staff, I thought, could the Belfast method help close the staffing gap in our industry?
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, as Jeff kind of says in the event chat, that exactly what we're doing with the Belfast method is what he's been doing for years.
Yeah, that's way ahead of us. We're all excited. Jeff's like, okay, all right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he's trying to get involved, so we're going to get to learn from Jeff's experience now as well. So we can't wait. So he's exactly kind of on the pulse that this decentralized kind of model for people moving around is great. It gives access to better people in better places, and I think he knows what he's doing.
I think Jeff might be starting to view the Belfast method and the people that play on the Belfast method as a recruiting tool. And if he isn't, he should. Next question. Oh, Jonas, go ahead, Jonas.
Exactly what you just said. One of the things that I found with building stuff on office hours in public is, for example, what we are working on with Tony's show, that we can learn and train people on projects where it doesn't, where we have fall nets if you fail, and then like build up stuff, because otherwise we are so new in some stuff. And where do you find operators if you don't train them?
This gets back into farming versus hunting and gathering, and the my dream is that I've got this huge stage sitting in our building, and my dream is to take that over, and then we're just running stuff every day, all day. There's there's a concert, and there's a thing, and a thing, and a thing, and people can just come in and learn how to do it inside of that as a platform, and we just kind of keep drawing it in, but we're a little bigger, baby steps. Next question.
Comes from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. And Rupert says, what redundancies are built into the Belfast method and how can they be tested end to end?
Go ahead, Richard.
What we've done so far, I mean, we've got redundancies in that we still have an on-site operator who can kind of, if we lose all connections into the building, because it's a stream show, if we lose connections into the building, we've got other problems kind of happening anyway with the delivery of the entire show. But in terms of internet connection, we have a failover into a couple of different MiFi devices as well as a hardline connection. And for delivery of the show, we've got an live view solo for getting the signal back out. So there's redundancies in that. There's a lot of people in lots of different places, so we had 3 or 4 people switching at any one time. So in the back end of the last show, which is the first one we'd started using comms for, we would talk to each other and then acknowledge when one person had control versus when another person had control. So we moved it from Jim to Todd to Aaron as we needed, as different people wanted to get experience and as different people came in to call the show. So there's a lot of failover in the number of people, but there's also then the technical level of we had as many connections as we could throw into the building to make sure we could stay up and running.
Jonas?
And exactly, that's something where Streamweaver will be able to help with, like having network issues, and with SRT as a protocol that can get you back some packets for the control, and just knowing that your control message will end up on the other end and not get lost anywhere.
Next question.
Aaron Husledge, Durham, North Carolina, up next. What sorts of tools should we build to make this whole thing easier to accomplish? A proxy for ATEM control, remote graphics, remote PTZ control, what?
Tlaloc?
I think that we are building things each week to try to move forward with this. We are working on trying to get the PTZ control to go out into the wider area network. We've got some Isadora actors that I had from another show that that we got working with Richard's PTZs. At that point, Isadora can work as the glue, and you can pull in, OSC commands. You can do all kinds of stuff that is outside of the Blackmagic infrastructure, because Blackmagic talks to itself really well, doesn't talk to other things as well. So you have to have some other glue to do work with other pieces of equipment. And so I think keep working, keep iterating, and it'll be awesome.
Jonas?
Whatever someone builds for that project should really include HTTP web interfaces, so we can easily share it. It's not the most ideal way to control stuff. We still want hardware to control other hardware, but an HTTP interface is always great for debugging and fallback. And then also OSC, so Tlaloc and Andy can work on Isadora. And what I think would be great is a status indicator if one of your operators is down, because that's one of the things that I am still thinking about, how to detect when a person has an outage. Because just because someone isn't talking about comms, then we would need to start like comm checks every 5 minutes or so. That would be a great tool, just having a dashboard to visualize connection status, data, and like handle the failovers that way more. And remote graphics, with John Barker, my live streams are completely done remotely with the H2R graphics tool that's coming out soon-ish.
And, you know, and the, there is, because we're hitting all of these different ways of doing it across the different kinds of shows, we're going to keep on just kind of figuring out what works. It's really easy if you're only doing one kind of show to only fix the problems for that show. But because of between Office Hours 2.0 and the Tony Mobley and what we're going to do with Hosmuk and Victor and Belfast and all these other ones, we're hitting the problem from a bunch of different directions. And I think that's going to create a smarter solution for all of them. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago is up next with, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around spatial audio, pun intended, and its capabilities. Can you connect multiple listeners to the same feed? Alex's comment of sending music to listening cafes is what sparked this question.
Spatial audio is the future. It's the new stereo. Like, so we just have to, I mean, like, it's going to replace stereo, you know, so I mean, it's on its way to doing that. So we have to think about how we think in spatial audio, you know, and so how do we think in 5.1, 5.1.4, 7.1 for all those things. And I think that they'll venues, you know, and there are venues out there. When you hear it, the problem is when you hear it, you just suddenly hear it all around you all the time. And I know I have the advantage that I have a 7.1 at home, you know, at home. So I'm used to listening to everything that way. And I'm used to hearing things over here and things over here and things, you know, not above me, but behind me. I'm putting the four in soon. Anyway, for venues, they have to find something that sets them apart from everybody else. So if you're gonna have a venue where people can come in, you're gonna have to have that spatial audio that they can hear things coming. Now it's a little hard because only a certain number of people can hear it, you know, in the way that it was designed, you know. But in a theater, like for instance, if you're in a theater, I was talking to someone at THX years and years ago, and I said, so what's the best seats? And he said, they're all good seats. You know, like you gave me one of those, like every seat is special in the theater. And I was like, okay, I got that. But what are the best seats? And he said, there are 3 rows in the center. You count the number of speakers up to the side. You go to the middle speaker, or if it's an even number between the two speakers, that's the row in front of it, the row behind it. And he said, and then three seats either side. And that's that there are like 20 seats in there that are worth having. So that's the challenge for venues, is to have a space that everyone can sit in, that they're really going to experience it. But there's some wow and flutter to that, and I think that's going to be it. I do think we have to figure out how to generate the spatial first. So, you know, just doing it inside of you know, panning and figuring those things out, and what tools we use for that, and how we build that up. And that's something I'm working on pretty hard. So once I figure it out, I'm probably going to then talk to Richard about, okay, how do we, you know, install that into it so that we can generate spatial audio coming out of that and start spreading out the band and everything else. And where a lot of this happens, you're like, why would a single artist like Todd need it? Or why would a small venue like Richard's need it? And where you need that is the reverb. The reverb just suddenly creates, you know, obviously you want to put the sounds in those areas, and then someone like Todd that knows how to design it, you can have the sounds coming from all over, and especially if they're used to a click track and everything else. For a raw live band, you're only going to spread everything out just a little bit, and then you're going to get a reverb though that makes you feel like you're in the space, you know, and it's not just a dry, you know, but it's not stereo reverb, it's immersive reverb, which is a different thing, you know, and you can create a lot of really complex reactions. And so anyway, I think it's going to be exciting. I think that is coming soon. Behind, first we have to figure out how to make it work, you know, then we figure out how to, I have a friend of mine that I work with a lot on streams, and says, first you make it work, then you make it pretty, then you figure out how to break it. So that's the model. So next question.
George E. Kennedy Jr. in Washington, D.C. up next with, for those of us that are ATEM users, would investing in an ATEM 1 MixEffects Advanced panel be a good idea for the long term?
Go ahead, George.
Can I just say this before I get to that? My 4 years of college, I wish I could somewhat reverse it. 2 hours of office hours every day it feels like being in a classroom, and it's amazing. So obviously I have a couple of pieces of ATM gear. So I think we're getting to the point, if I want to continue, what I do outside is different from office hours, but continue in this environment and learn from you all. I think I'm going to invest in a panel just to use here in my office. I just wanted to see, well, it's a good idea, but just for, what we're doing.
I have a 1ME and I have a 2ME, and I can tell you that the jump between the two is dramatic. And the 4ME is even better, but I mean, the 4ME is a lot of money, but I would strongly, because the price came way down on the 2ME, I don't know what it is, but it's less than $5,000, I think now. The 1ME is great. The 2ME just gives you so much more control, over what you're doing, because you get to all the other MEs from that top panel, part of the panel. As opposed to the 1ME, where you're in this kind of weird switching thing that doesn't really, the 1ME works for simple shows, but as soon as you go to the 2ME, you have one that's the main show, and then you have one that is kind of a freelancer that you can keep on switching through. And that makes a big difference in the effectiveness of being able to cut. So if you're I wouldn't, unless you're putting in the small space, or you're trying to do it by yourself and you're doing a simple show, I wouldn't buy a 1ME panel anymore. Because now the price we used to have 2MEs that I owned a bunch of these that were 15,000 each, and that was like way too much. So I had lots and lots of 1ME boards. But with the new 2ME board that came down in price and increased the capacity and everything else, I would strongly save up for that, or just keep on doing it with what you got. So the 1ME board, I think, is not cost effective. If you're doing just simple shows by yourself, I think it makes sense. As soon as you get into anything remotely complex, you want to get to a 2ME board as fast as you can to make that work. The 4ME board is only if you're really building complex shows, and we use them on some of the shows that we have, and they're great, and I love them. But it's a big investment, so that's a different problem. What we're trying to do for some of the shows that we're doing is actually going the other direction, which is getting rid of the panel altogether and creating a smart system that's going to give you the information that you need when you need it. And you're simply using a web interface or a tap, some kind of tap structure that you're just kind of tapping on what you want. I think that's actually because we're getting to a point like with Office Hours 2.0, it's too complex to do on a board. Like literally the show that we're designing is too complex to run on even an 8ME board. It doesn't matter, because we're trying to do something with the super sources and everything else, and lower thirds and everything else, that you have to abstract it away from the operator to make it even doable, and so I wouldn't worry about, I wouldn't invest in any piece of hardware at the moment until you really felt like you needed it, because I think we're figuring out a lot of ways to make it a panel, like a piece of glass that you're just tapping, which I always tell people is a horrible idea. Like when they say, okay, I'm going to run my ATEM software on a touch screen, I'm like, don't ever do that, because you can't figure out where you're at. And there's a huge advantage of the panel in that way, that you can kind of feel your way through things and you can dial things in. I love having the extreme panel, for instance, to be able to just tap on something, but I'd be careful of investing in it until we see how this progresses, in this process. And by the way, to your first comment about it being a good education space, it's only going to get better because we all get smarter together. So as we learn more, we're going to accelerate in, as long as people stay in the group keeps accelerating on how fast it learns and how quickly it comes up with solutions. So it doesn't, the problem with school is that people are only in that class for one term, and then you lose everybody you just trained. So this one, we don't do that. We have people that keep learning, and so it's a much more efficient system over long periods of time. Next question.
John Barker in Malmo, Sweden is up next, and he says, how can I and others get their show Belfastified?
Go ahead, Jonas.
I think you're on a good way knowing what type of equipment you have, having stuff that's IP controllable. I still worry about your internet when we did some shows with you. It's just having 4G is sometimes a bit challenging, but I think being here is a great part. As soon as we get some wrinkles figured out with Richard, and now with Todd, I'm sure we can make that happen with all the items you have around.
Jim?
Yeah. Ask Todd, be careful what you ask for.
But I do, and the other thing is as we start to increase these, we do and Hosmak underlined it a little bit. We have a little bit of collision between two different shows that we have to kind of figure out. And I'm going to try to work through that process. We may move things permanently so that there's more space. I got to figure that out. But the be conscious of when you think about a show that you might want to do, of where the other shows are, so that we don't have too many overlaps, so we don't stretch our resources too far. So I'm still trying to deal with the Saturday one. Next question.
James Hutchinson in Dublin, Ireland is up next. And he says, I saw an equipment list that Richard had in Belfast. It was very impressive. Was this gear pre-existing or was it purchased for this project? And could the same effect be produced on a much reduced budget?
Go ahead, Richard first.
Yeah, most of the especially the AV equipment was brand new within the last year. As I was kind of showing in the photographs, we did start. We were in March last year. We were still working on Wirecast and two PTZ optics cameras. So everything from the Ursas to the Panasonics and everything else is bought within the last kind of 8 months. A lot of it is because of my personality and the way I plan things, is that I bought two big things in triplicate, the Panasonics and the Ursas, for the very reason that Alex kind of pointed out not too long ago, is matching cameras. So they're designed as a set of 3 to be deployed separately, or the fact that the Ursas you have more control of can match the Panasonics with a bit of work. So I kind of overinvested deliberately in a couple of specific areas because I didn't want to have to mess around with the quality of what we were doing eventually. In terms of could it be produced on a much more reduced budget? Yeah, certainly. Again, a lot of the stuff we've deployed is because I have a specific direction that I want us to go in. But we did a massive festival here in Belfast in January called the Out to Lunch Festival, all off an Atem Mini. We ran the festival off our Panasonics, so we overkilled it on the cameras, but we ran the entire thing into a little mini and had Wirecast for graphics, so you can do a huge amount off just even the minis and now the mini extremes.
Yeah, Todd.
I'm sorry that I didn't have a excuse me, a chance to make a keynote budget list for myself, but I think it's worth saying that I mean, Richard's show and the theater there, that is absolutely one thing. And I think I kind of felt bad for wanting to answer this question, but I did want to say, in contrast to that, I've got 2 $800 cameras, 2 $300 cameras, an ATEM Mini Extreme, a couple of things that Jim sent to me, meaning a VPN router, a streaming bridge should we decide to use it, and the pluggable monitor thing, which I haven't even been able to employ yet. But really, it's not much of a budget that I've spent to be able to enter into this interaction with this Belfast method. So no matter what we have, I think it's really worthwhile to look at what we can do with what we have. I guess that's what I said, what I want to say.
Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas says, does Zoom form a part of the Belfast method pipeline?
I think it's how we all talk to each other. And it's how you guys see the multi-view, right? And we've done some stuff over multi-view really successfully. We keep on using Zoom for multi-view has worked really well. Nate comes in and switches shows for us regularly now, and he's just doing it over Zoom. It works really well. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas back again with, what types of events beyond performance could the Belfast method be applied to?
Go ahead, Richard.
The way I kind of initially approached this was that we would start with bands, but then we would move into other art forms. So very keen to kind of move into theater, but move into improv and other kind of performance-based things in that way. But I'm also quite keen to get my Greasy Mitts and Tony Mobley's show and ZoomISO, that fella, at some point. And if I can stay up that late on a Wednesday, I would love to. So there's a huge amount of different options. We're doing a dementia fiction festival in late September. That is 2 long days of just presentations and talks. They'll be run entirely off ZoomISO, and that's a perfect also system for doing this methodology, because the equipment is essentially the same. We've got camera inputs from ZoomISO, but you all runs through the ATEM, all runs through the advanced panel, exactly the kind of same workflow.
Paul.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about how to pull this into opera and how to pull this into theater. And what it does is it decentralizes the production. I am brought around the country to do different things, to be a lighting designer, to be a projection designer, to do video work. outfitting an opera in the area right now with a bunch of gear from TVE Store. And this work that we're doing is prepping me to be able to work for them from wherever I am. And so that is a really, really huge thing economically for this group. So if you think about that, get these companies ready to go there, get these companies ready to have that equipment so that we can be working for them.
And the thing is that the temptation is to keep all this secret, like, oh, we're going to figure this all out and then we're going to keep it up. But really what we want to do is create a new business of people doing it because there's not enough people to do what is next. Like if this flips a switch and lots of theaters and lots of other people start incorporating what we're talking about, there's not enough people in office hours or in the world at the moment to supply the demand. And that's what we want to create rather than trying to hang on to it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. What internet connections do you have coming into the building, and what routers and switchers do you use?
Go ahead, Richard.
It's what's called in the UK a leased line. I'm sure you probably call it something similar in the States. So it's a gig line, but we're only using 100 up, 100 down as the main kind of ingest. And then it's a unified ubiquity system running off USG into the Procast switches or the kind of main kind of system.
Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas, up next again. How can the audience interaction be built into the Belfast method?
Go ahead, Richard.
There's a really simple way that we've already started doing it with those who watched it on YouTube. Actually, all the YouTube comments and things were moderated and went into the studio for the band to read and talk to in a really simple way. Alex, I don't know if you're going to let me talk about your system that you've mentioned to me in the past, because we've bought our rear projection screen, so that's coming at some point. Is the Zoom audience as well?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's fine. One of the things that we're talking about is the idea of having in smaller venues like this, having a rear projection screen and putting a camera right in the center of it, or figuring out exactly where to cutting a hole through the screen and putting the camera. At first it would cut out people, but I think that over time what we're looking at is using like Unreal Engine to push people subtly around it so that no one's cut off. But when the artist looks over at those folks, they're getting eye-to-eye contact, with them. And we think that, like, when I look at Richard's, I think of like 3 big screens, instead of an audience, like 3 big rear projection screens that kind of go around them, and they just see lots of people that they get to interact with. And it's something that Daria actually really pioneered, with one screen, but this would be at a different level. Go ahead, Jonas.
So one of the other cool things that you could do is people like to manipulate stuff on the other side. So one find that I had on Twitch is this streamer called Dashdax, and you can donate to switch cameras and feed them. And it didn't even need to be that, but like there are lots of streamers making a lot of money by having nanoleafs in their background and people being able to change it to their color. And it's nothing intrusive that really messes up your live production or something, but it's a nice concept of somebody. People can be so happy seeing a red color in your background if they wanted a red color. Like, let them vote on small lights in the venue, or like make some stuff happen in the set. I really like that, and it's one of the things where there's a framework in Germany that's actually built for just audience interaction with heuristics and everything.
Jim?
Yeah, I was actually thinking along the lines of just the audio side. So one of the things we didn't get a chance to finish was the ability for the crew to be able to talk back into the kind of the Zoom breakout room to either advise that we couldn't hear and we had to relay it. So we'll endeavor to have that working for tomorrow.
And one of the things that and we're open to having like a Makana instance, for it as well. Someone just has to design it. You could just talk to Ken or talk to somebody or talk to someone. But if someone sends us a design, it takes us a couple of weeks to put it together, but we can put it together for some of these tests. We're trying to find places for it and safe little places to start making it more available for folks to use. But one of the things that I see is for artists that are streaming, one of the problems for artists that are streaming, and Todd might be able to underline this, but if you stream everything, you're only going to do it in so many versions. Now, Todd does something live every time and it's something new and everything else. But for a band playing their hit song or the song that their best songs or whatever, once they played them, everyone saw it, right? one of the things that I really think is going to be powerful is slowing that down and having more interaction with the audience. And so play a song, discuss it with the audience, and have them have an experience that they wouldn't get just listening to the album. They get to ask questions, and they get to be part of that conversation. And you saw us experiment with that a little bit with Todd, with Daria, with Peter Hillman, with Brian Vander Ark, where we're experimenting with this idea of a conversation and with some music. And I think that that's a really, I'm much more engaged in that than I am in just watching someone play 45 minutes or an hour of music straight. I'd rather have play a song and then tell me why, we did one with, well, anyway, so we've done some with some pretty big artists where they just go through their album, but watching them play it would be, interesting. Next question.
Kalak Lopez Waterman in New York or wherever he is now, Astoria, New York, says, what are the next steps for lighting?
Talala.
Yeah, threw the ball to myself there. So I just wanted to say that we tried 3 different things. We tried sending ArtNet across Dreamweaver, which is something that I've done before and has worked. It always takes a little bit of time to get it working. And there are a lot of things about networking that can slow you down with that. So that's what we ran into. The other thing we wanted to try is console to console. So consoles are often made to work within a building so that you can control them. You have a primary and a secondary machine, and then any person that is importing information into that console will import it into the whole system. And that's another thing we tried. It was called multi-console with the EO system, the ETC EO system. That has not worked. I've been trying it for about a year. I was hoping with a lot of good VPN minds that I might be able to get that to work. It didn't. And then the third way is to remotely control QLab or ETC EOS. And the lag was a little too slow. So we're trying to figure out what the next iteration will be. It probably will end up being Streamweaver, but I just wanted to give that before everyone else answers.
And Jim.
And yeah, Talak, I just want to let you know that the gear you recommended will be arriving today. So you'll have another test subject to turn my lights on and off and change colors and that kind of stuff. So.
Excellent. Wonderful.
Jonas.
And one of the things that Jim is working on with centralizing the VPN and making it a star network versus we have it now, point-to-point connection, somebody's calling in, that we don't want to make it work just for Talala, we want to make it work for everyone. So if we manage to, maybe we have to look into that again, if we maybe manage to get the EOS console in the cloud and remote Talala in over Parsec, I think that could work because in video it really works. And that might be one of the next ways to work it, getting a console into the cloud, and maybe we can pursue a vendor to give us a key or something.
Next question.
Marty Adius in Maryland says, and I'm going to paraphrase a little, if you aren't familiar with the band's music, it can be difficult, I believe you meant, to anticipate solos and movements. Does Richard use a static wide shot camera for the director to see the entire stage?
Go ahead, Richard.
In the first iteration, what we did is we pumped the program feed as well as the multi-view into Zoom for the office hours attendees to call the show. And then the second iteration, because in the first they fed back the program view was pointless. So we just fed the multi-view in. Normally in shows, we would always have at least one safety wide shot to go to. But for the office hours stuff, we've only been pumping in just the multi-view. What the show callers want on those multi-views is up to them.
Next question.
Joel in Mumbai, India says, is there a brief history of the Belfast method? It'll help folks like me who aren't up to speed on it, either a video or a blog describing it.
Richard?
Yeah, we have to get onto a video series now. There's a special channel in Discord under Labs that kind of gives a brief kind of the discussion of where we've come from, the kind of kit list, a little kind of introduction of why we're doing it and all that kind of stuff.
Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas up next with, was there any feedback from last week's performers about their experience?
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little bit straight after the show in the kind of debrief before moving into the cooking, and the band was really happy. We kind of made it slightly harder on the second band because I didn't even give them a sound engineer in the building. I just gave them myself to kind of direct them to the console and give them some cables, and then Craig remotely kind of talked them through it and told them what the to plug into. For me, it was just testing what it would be like if you just removed the internal infrastructure entirely, and you just have a band arrive with a console and that's and the person on the remote end. And I mean, they're a very good band and very giving of their time. But they absolutely loved it. They thought it was great. And Craig was absolutely, I mean, I think that's a lot to do with how good Craig was in talking to them and reassuring them and working with them and just nudging them as the band that we described, and nudging them a little bit each time to get better and better and better.
Next question. Last question.
The last one we have on a regular queue this morning comes from Stan Chan in Roseville, California. What are the existing tools for enabling Atmos in a live stream?
It's hard right now. So it requires a specific set of encoders that are required to it. So the encoders that can do Atmos that we use are the elemental and live encoders, the appliances, or the ATEM Titans. These are both expensive encoders to do what we need to do. And even with those, in some cases or all cases, we need to use what's called a linear acoustics 5291 to encode multi-channel into a EAC3. And so those are things that are what we have to kind of think through. And so what we want to do is get ahead of it, because eventually that's all going to be available. If you look at the trajectory of how Elemental does things, is things work in the appliances. First they work in the servers, then they work in the appliances, then they work in the cloud servers, and they work in the cloud live. And what we're seeing right now is that a lot of the processing is in our live encoders. So we know that eventually, someday in the future, we can expect to see the kind of tools that we have in our live encoders in the cloud. And then if you take this box that I have laying around here somewhere, but you have the little encoder that Elemental makes that is 4K, this is the new Link, 4K, 10-bit, 16 channels. I can then send that to, there's somewhere in the future that I believe that I will be able to send that to Richard, and Richard pumps, we can run all the mixes, in Belfast or Todd's house or wherever that is, or Richter's house. And that can send all the channels plus the 10-bit video into the cloud. And then we'll be able to do all the processing into Atmos from there. That's not there yet. So what we'd have to do now to do it, it'll be easier to do in our office at the moment, bringing bands into our space to do that. But what we want to do is we'll probably need to do figure out a way to do a transport from Belfast to our facility to package it up because of the hardware that's required. But that's like for the next 6 to 9 months, and we don't want to wait 6 to 9 months to figure this out. So we'll figure out how to do it in hardware right now. And we're going to get really good at it, because a lot of what we're going to do, and that's how we want to do, like somewhere in the future, what I look at is like for having Todd join us and do a thing, or having another artist come in, we would pipe them to us, maybe their video over Zoom, but using Unity Connect to send all the channels to us. And then we will do the Atmos mix locally, and then it goes out to the stream. It means that if you're in the panel, if you're in Zoom, you won't hear it. But if you're in the stream, you will hear it. And it looks like we have a pretty good chance we're going to have an iOS and tvOS app to watch it on. So we're working on that. Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
Sorry, the hazards of 2 computers. We were successful getting 4 channels of audio out. So like more than 2, that's good. And of course it's unlimited. If you consider this question answered, Alex, I wondered if I might just say 2 things about tomorrow.
Yeah.
If I might. So tomorrow, first of all, if anybody in our illustrious crew has original video material that we could use just for running in the background to connect, if anybody wants to kind of be involved in that way on a tangential level, just like providing some things that aren't copywritten, that wouldn't flag on YouTube, please just ping me in Discord. Let me know. If we just had a Dropbox folder, it might be really, really nice to evaluate some of those and bring them in. That's one thing. Then number 2, the first hour tomorrow when we begin, we'll be working stuff out. That's kind of our rehearsal and sound check time. And then the second hour is when I'll probably go live on YouTube. Alex, if it's okay for me to put a YouTube link in, in Mukana, I'll do that. Just a subscribe link so you could be notified. So I'll put that in Mukana. And yeah, you're so welcome to either watch on that side or the other. But I really love to engage with audience. So anybody who's there in YouTube and wants to engage there through chat, I'll be watching that every single moment, and that's most of the fun for me rather than playing. So loving to connect in that way. Awesome. That's all I had to say. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for the opportunity, Alex and Richard and everybody.
Well, I'm just grateful that so many people took it on. You know, smart people figuring out hard things. It's cool. So anyway, so it's you know, it doesn't help if I just go okay, or Richard just says, hey, it's all available. I mean, I can't imagine another group where Richard could have said it's all available and then things start getting sorted out. So it's pretty exciting. Anyway, so thanks to our producers. I did kick a bunch of questions back that were kind of low votes today, just because we were running out of time. I'm sorry about that, but bring some of those back, and I'm sure that you can talk about them in the after hours as well. Richard?
Yeah, just one thing. I completely agree, Alex. Thank you so much to everyone who's volunteered to be involved so far. It's been absolutely, you know, you've made it so far. It's been absolutely brilliant to get involved and to learn so much from everyone, and to just say that it's an open session. So again, as we continue these, if you haven't already volunteered or if you want to get involved, it doesn't have to be this week, doesn't have to be next. Just get involved. Hit me up in Discord. You know, it's open. It's here for us to learn together.
Yeah, it's amazing. So thanks again to the producers for the great questions and the great conversation, and thanks to the panelists for the great chatting and the great answers and the great you know, and thanks to everyone from the Belfast method that showed up today to kind of give us the inside scoop. So anyway, we're gonna have the long day tomorrow, so get some good sleep tonight. I know I'm gonna try to do the best I can, and otherwise we're jumping into the after hours. All right, see you there.